DAB digital radio and 1089 and 1053 AM. The Week with George Galloway on Talk Sport.
You're listening to The Week with me, George Galloway. I'm here every Friday night between 10 and 1 o'clock in the morning. And my telephone number, as always, is 08717 223344. That's 08717 223344. Women callers are prioritised, as are first-time callers and callers who disagree with the point of view I'm taking on the issue. So clearly indicate if you fall into one or more of those categories, and you'll almost certainly get on the radio over the next 3 hours. You can text me if you've still got 50 pence, plus normal sending charges, on 81089. And not least because I want your suggestion of a song that sums up the week that we've just been through. Or you can email me, of course, free of charge through the website at talksport.co.uk. It's George Galloway. It's the week, so it must be TalkSport.
The Week with George Galloway on TalkSport.
Well, weeks don't get more tumultuous than the one that we've just been through. Indeed, are still going through. As I look at the television screens, I see the crowds in Athens. I see the parliamentarians bellowing at each other, awaiting the vote on the motion of no confidence in the government of George Papandreou, and the possibility of Greece falling out of or withdrawing from the Eurozone and putting the pressure on Italy, whose hapless Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi looked like he well needed a bunga party as he left the soirée in Cannes earlier this evening. The economic situation is bleak. Of that there is no doubt. There's no point in patting ourselves on the back and saying, well, we're not in the euro, because, of course, the channel is narrow, and it certainly won't stop the tidal wave of economic collapse, which may very well be round the corner in the Eurozone and in the European Union, with which we do well over 40% of our trade. So no doubt the backdrop of the international economic situation is going to dominate the subjects that we're dealing with this evening, which are by no means all economic, though most of them are. Excuse me. In the last hour, we'll have Mark Steele in the studio, one of our best friends, a man who sometimes occupies this seat, one of the funniest men in the country, one of the best writers in the country, writing a weekly column for the Independent newspaper and writing a whole series of books, all of which are positively brilliant, all of which are on my bookshelves, and he has another one out, which we'll be talking about in his company. But we'll take some calls to Mark Steele as well, because we might need some little light relief after the heaviness of some of the subjects that we're going to have to deal with, one of which is the impending mass wave of strikes in the public sector in Britain, which are scheduled for the end of this month. Heather Wakefield, the head of local government from Unison, which has 1.1 million members, who include NHS staff and others in the public sector, had a majority of more than 3-1 in favour of a strike starting on the 30th of November. Unison balloted nurses, teaching assistants, social workers, care assistants, paramedics, police staff, school dinner ladies, probation workers, and cleaners. Now let me nail something right away, just before we get some of the predictable chorus from some of our listeners. We're not talking about gold-plated pensions. We're not talking about bowler-hatted, pin-striped, umbrella-carrying mandarins from Whitehall. We're talking about dinner ladies. We're talking about school cleaners. We're talking about care assistants. We're talking about teaching assistants. We're talking about nurses. None of them, repeat, none of them have gold-plated pensions. They all, actually, the ones I mentioned, have pathetically poor pensions, into which they have been paying into the pension pot on the basis of a promise to retire at a given age, which has, by fiat, been altered. So they're going to have to work years longer, pay much more into their pot, and receive much less than they had been budgeting for. And if that's not a cause for a trade union taking up the cudgels on their behalf, I have no idea why trade unions would exist. So we'll be talking to Heather, who's a very good spokesperson for Unison, and we'll get her take on that before, of course, inviting yours on the phone lines. 08717 223344, I remind you, is the number. We'll also be talking to a man I spoke to on my television show last night, Spyro Van Leeman. Says here founder and organizer of Occupy London, but he chastised me for so describing him last night, making the point that it's a thoroughly egalitarian outfit, and he's neither the founder nor the organizer. He's just a supporter. They eschew the concept of leadership, and maybe that's one thing I'll ask him about. We'll be talking to Matt O'Connor, definitely founder of Fathers for Justice, who claim that divorced fathers are to be denied a legal right to a relationship with their children in a review of family law. Matt thinks that the Family Justice Report will feed fatherlessness and social unrest, condemn tens of thousands more children to losing contact with their fathers, with serious social consequences. 1 in 3 children in the United Kingdom is fatherless, and the group claim that fatherless young boys and men were a contributory factor in the summer riots. And few sensible people would disagree with that, I must say. And it's certainly true that this Norgrove report has attracted widespread criticism for the way in which it has dismissed concerns about this very point. So I'm a little bit more sympathetic to Matt O'Connor than I was the last time I spoke to him. Maybe I was wrong last time. I was wrong once before, around about 1976 or 77. So I may have been wrong also on that. And we'll be talking to John Simmons, Director of Policy Research and Development for the British Association of Adoption and Fostering. The Times newspaper reported, and this is a quite staggering statistic, that only 60 children under a year old were adopted in the year to March 2011. In total, in the whole country, 3,050 children were placed for adoption, a fall of 5% on the miserable figures of the previous year. Now, National Adoption Week runs from the 31st of October to the 6th of November, so we've just got in on time, and so we are still within National Adoption Week. The total number of adoptions has continued to drop, falling to 3,050. As I said, now there are 60,000 children living in local authority care in England, and the figure should be none. If we paid the grandmothers, if we paid the aunties, if we gave support, perhaps, to families to avoid them giving up their children for adoption, we might not be in this mess. But insofar as we're in it, it seems to me unarguable that every child has a right to a home with a family. And there is no shortage of families looking to adopt. You've only got to look at the number of people roaming around the world adopting children in other people's countries. So we've got a real problem, and John Simmons may be able to help us with that. And as I say, in the last hour, we've got the great Mark Steele, author of a new book called In Town, which I've just been flicking through, and it's up to his usual standard, I must say. He'll be in, and maybe we'll even persuade him to stay long enough to take a few calls. So it's the week, all right. It's George Galloway. It's Talk Sport. Members of the UK's largest union have voted overwhelmingly in favour of strike action to protect their pensions. Unison is now set for the biggest public sector walkout for decades, due to take place on November the 30th. But there's Some criticism of the ballot, which saw less than 1 in 4 of the total union membership backing industrial action. Just as well those critics don't apply that to British parliamentary and local government elections. Treasury Chief Secretary Danny Alexander, otherwise known as the Ginger Rodent, says the results speak for themselves.
I think the fact that less than a quarter of members voted for strike action, 3/4 chose not to do that. And I think that the unions should listen to their members and recognise that most members do not share the enthusiasm for strike action.
Well, that takes the biscuit, I must say. How many people voted for Danny Alexander to be the Chief Secretary of the Treasury? The Liberal Democrats actually lost MPs at the last general election, and yet now occupy some of the commanding heights in British government. The hypocrisy of these people simply knows no bounds. The facts of the matter are, those who voted in the ballot voted overwhelmingly to strike on the 30th of November. And Heather Wakefield is the head of local government from the union concerned Unison, and I welcome her to the show. Heather, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, let's deal with that point first, that Alexander has just been making, the criticism of the turnout in the vote.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the Tory legislation that forces us to ballot our members in a postal ballot. In the days when we were allowed to have secret ballots at the workplace, we used to have 80% turnout in situations like this. We have a Tory law which requires us to, in our case, send 1.1 million pieces of paper through the post. And as we know, people tend not to respond to them in the same way. What we do know, of course, from previous experience is that this is a respectable turnout with a very high yes vote, and that a lot more people will strike than bothered to vote.
So tell us what the strike will mean and why you think it will help push the cause on.
Well, the strike will mean that Unison, together with teaching, civil service unions, other unions in the public sector, will all be out on strike or taking action on November the 30th. This framework that the government, this framework agreement that the government has offered us, doesn't conclude in any way negotiations on anything. It's certainly a move forward on some of the issues surrounding the pension dispute, but it doesn't cover quite a number of issues, and nothing has been concluded. And so, again, because of the legislation, we have to continue with our action, otherwise our ballot would become invalid. It's very complicated to explain.
No, you've explained it clearly. The propagandists are out talking again about these apparently gold-plated pensions. Give us some idea of what the pensions are that we're talking about amongst the groups of workers that you organise.
The average pension for a local government worker is £4,000, and 75% of local government workers are women, and the average for a woman is £2,800. And that, of course, reflects the fact that they receive very low pay. I think people get confused by the concept of a final salary pension. A final salary does not mean that you get your final salary. It simply means your pension is based on your final salary. But these pensions are very, very low.
Well, you see, this truth, and I know it, of course, to be a truth, is clearly not travelling. I listened to, on Radio 4, Any Questions this evening. Mm-hmm. There was overwhelming hostility. I don't know where it was coming from, but there was overwhelming hostility to the strikes. And that hostility was clearly born of a belief that public sector pensioners are somehow in clover. Well,
that's clearly not the case. Some of the other pensions are slightly better, and let's not forget that at the moment the police officers, the armed forces and firefighters are not covered by this particular offer from the government. But it's clearly not the case. We know perfectly well what our members get. in their pensions. Teachers will get a bit more. A handful of civil servants will get even more than that. But public sector pay is low, and pensions obviously reflect pay. People get a 60th of their earnings for every year that they work. So if you think about that, 70% of local government workers earn less than £21,000 a year, which is a shameful statistic in itself. So those people are inevitably going to get very low pensions.
So the complaint of the workers is not just that they're going to have to work longer, pay more, and receive less, but all three of those. Give us an idea of that.
Oh, that's absolutely right. The government's already changed the indexation of pensions away from the retail price index to the consumer price index, which means a cut of between 10 and 15% in their final pensions. They are increasing the retirement age over time up to 68 from 60 in some cases, 65 in others. And they are increasing pension contributions, by about 50% in some cases. So inevitably, people are, yes, paying more, working longer, and they will get smaller pensions.
There's no reason to suppose then in these circumstances, is there, that the Tory and Lib Dem hope that those who didn't vote in your ballot are going to turn up for work on the 30th?
I think there will be overwhelming support for action on the 30th, because at the moment our members have nothing in their pockets which is definite. And our members in local government, the largest group affected by this, are particularly suspicious, if you like, because when the Chancellor promised public sector workers £250 if their pay was frozen and they earned less than £21,000 in the budget, which he did, our members in local government assumed that would apply to them too, and he told us in writing that it would. And then they're in the second year of a pay freeze without that £250. I'm afraid they've already learnt that they cannot trust. That they need to see the colour of the money.
Can't trust the Tories. Who'd have thought it? That was Heather Wakefield, Head of Local Government from Unison. Thank you, Heather. Let's take the first call of the evening on that very subject. It's from David in Liverpool. Go ahead, David.
Hi, George. Nice to speak to you.
And you, sir. Go ahead.
Do you know what, George? I'm 66. I've retired 12 months now. And I tell my younger nephews and nieces, I can remember the 80s with the Margaret Thatcher government, and you can't trust the Tories. They changed the goalposts, and 30 years on, with the help, disgraceful help of the Liberal Democrats, this is what they're doing. It's an absolute shambles, and it's a disgrace. And I'm not afraid to say it. It is always the working man and woman who suffer, and they always have done under this Tory government and under previous Tory governments. I want to make a quick point, George. When I've worked since I left school in 1960 at 15, I had 4 jobs until I was 65. I'm very fortunate, coming from Liverpool, that I was never unemployed in all that time, even in the Thatcher government years. I've just retired 12 months. And when I think of, I'm very passionate against catching people who are fiddling the system. Well, I'm talking about, benefit sheets. I've no problem with that. But what gets me with Cameron and the Tory government, they can dish all this up to the Daily Mail and the Telegraph, and that gets front page 1 headlines. Let's catch these fiddlers. But I wish they'd put as much into catching these people. It cost this country $1.5 billion for the benefit sheet, but it cost this country $8 billion for these people who are earning millions, who don't pay the correct amount of tax, want to siphon it off to these different countries. They never give this story to the Daily Mail. It really does disgust me, and I am a working class lad.
Well, you're a very articulate one, David, I must say. Thanks for that first call of the evening. Now, I'm looking for songs that sum up the week, and I've got two crackers right to start with, and, well, they're the same song. But Den in Coppell says, George, the record's got to be Grease by Frankie Valli. And Thomas Serval in Southsea says, good evening, George. How about Grease is the Word by Frankie Valli to close tonight's show? Well, that'll be hard to beat, but try and beat it, because I don't make my mind up till the very last minute. So 81089 is the number to text if you've got 50 pence plus normal sending charges, or you can send it in free by email through the website at talksport.co.uk. But you can call. Most of all, I need you to call on 087 1722 3344. Britain's considering boosting its contribution to the International Monetary Fund's lending facilities for countries in financial crisis. David Cameron made the announcement as he arrived at the G20 summit in Cannes. But the Prime Minister says the UK won't support direct IMF investment in a Eurozone bailout fund. And, he insists, he'll defend Britain's interests.
I'm here to safeguard the British economy. We've taken difficult decisions at home that have protected us from the worst of the debt crisis. If the world could come together and solve some of its problems, the worst of which is the Eurozone crisis, then actually that would be a big boost to the British economy.
Well, I don't know about you, but I thought he looked rattled at the G20 summit. He looked bedraggled and rattled, like a man all at sea. As well he might, because for all that bluster, Britain's economic situation, where revised growth in the last quarter was 0.1%. That's after having, quote-unquote, come out of a recession. We're about to tip back into it, a double-dip recession. And we're looking at a return to the 1930s in Britain. We're looking at a return to truly mass unemployment. And the more they cut, the more people they make unemployed, the weaker demand gets in the economy, and the more people become unemployed, and the weaker demand gets, and so on. These people, these jokers, Berlusconi and the rest, the people who put us in this mess with their neoliberal economics, didn't look to me confident that they could possibly be the people to take us out of it. But that's just the backdrop. The subject that we're looking at right now is the impending strike of public sector workers over pensions on the 30th of November, and Ryan in Worcester disagrees with me and Heather from Unison, Heather Wakefield, so we better put him up right away. Go ahead, Ryan.
Good evening, George.
Good evening, sir.
Very much respect most of your views. I don't agree with a lot of your views, but I respect your right to hold those views. And I was a little bit shocked by two things that was come up out of your conversation with Heather. Firstly, you mentioned that you'd been listening to Any Questions.
Yes.
And said that there was quite a hostile contributors on there towards the strike.
The audience.
You were surprised at where they came from.
The audience, yeah.
I have to say that when I have to use one of my very precious 28 days holiday because I got to look after my children, because school teachers who get 13 weeks holiday are having a day's strike, I don't feel a lot of sympathy towards them.
You would if you were a school teacher, though.
Not really, no.
Really?
Genuinely,
if you were a school teacher, you'd be delighted that you were going to have to work perhaps 8 years longer, pay more towards your pension, and get less. You'd be delighted?
Yeah, I'd be delighted if I'd had a pay rise in the last 5 years.
Well, you see,
I'd be delighted if someone like Heather, who sits there and says, 21,000 is a disgrace, I long to earn 21,000.
Yes, but Ryan, I'll let you back in. Ryan, I'll let you back in again in a minute, because I would like you to respond to this. This is exactly the kind of false consciousness which keeps the working class as a whole down. because you have a low pay, because you may have a low pension, how does it profit you for somebody else to get effectively a pay cut through having to pay more towards their pension? How does it profit you in any way? How does it improve your situation if the rest of the workforce comes down to your level? How does that profit you?
They couldn't come far enough down to
But
my level.
that just makes my point more strongly, Ryan.
No, they
Look,
couldn't
you're
come
obviously
far enough down.
getting...
George, they've made choices. Okay, they've become school teachers.
No.
And most of them have never done a proper day's work.
Well, first of all, that's a deeply insulting comment, that a teacher has never done a proper day's work. What do you think teaching is if it's not a proper day's work? Have you ever looked after 30, 40 children in a class? Have you ever been responsible for educating the next generation of people in this country that are the future of this country? Have you ever faced an unruly group of pupils in a school that are, for a variety of reasons, wrecking the learning environment in that? The idea that a teacher isn't a genuine job is deeply insulting. But secondly, Mr. Smart Alec, you sound very clever to me, but you're earning way less than £21,000 a year. I utterly deplore the fact that you're earning way less than £21,000 a year. But I'm putting again to you the question that you failed to answer. How does cutting other people's wages down towards your level, you say yourself they would have to come a long way to get to your level, which begs the question of what kind of job you're doing, but how does bringing other people's living standards down towards yours put an extra potato on your plate?
Can I speak?
Yeah.
Okay. They'd have to come down to around about £17,000 take a year.
You're earning £17,000 a year. What do you
As a
do?
manager.
What do you do? You're a manager on £17,000 a year?
Yep.
You're having a laugh. What are you managing?
A hotel.
You're managing a hotel for £17,000 a year? Well,
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever heard of
And I have
looking
no
around
pension
for another
provision.
job?
I've got no pension provision.
So you've got £17,000 a year for managing a hotel and no pension provision,
Yeah.
and you want to beggar school dinner ladies. How will that help you, Ryan? How will it help you? Answer me that.
Well, how does it help me having one of my days' holiday taken away?
Well, look, Ryan, you're dodging this fundamental question. A dinner lady who used to retire at 60 on a pension of around £4,000 a year has been told she'll have to work till she's 68 ladling out those potatoes to the children in the school. She'll have to pay more from her poverty pay, which is, by the way, less than £17,000 a year, in order to have a pension at all. And when she gets her pension at 68, it'll be less than the pension that she'd have got if she retired last year. Now, I'm asking you again, how will that benefit you?
It won't benefit me.
Well, why are you arguing for it then?
Because who's fighting for me, George?
Well, if there's nobody fighting for you, it's about time you joined a trade union. And it's about time you actually looked in the situations vacant column, because I could get you a job as a hotel manager in London tomorrow on double 17,000. You're being grossly exploited by the hotel you're managing. Now, more fool you if you're prepared to do that, but don't ask dinner ladies to pay for the fact that your employer is treating you like a slave. That's all I'm saying. Here's Jonathan in Runcorn. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Oh, hi, George. How you doing?
Oh, I'm boiling mad after that.
Do you know something, mate? I can feel it here in my shed.
Unbelievable.
I listen to you every Friday in my shed, okay?
Okay. Well, does the wife put you out?
In my life.
Does the wife put you out in the shed? Is it that bad?
No, what it is, George, I'm not allowed to smoke in the house.
Oh, I see, okay.
All right, so I go to the shed and listen to you on the radio when I have a cigarette, right? But tonight, in the first time in 12 months, I have to say you're right.
Okay, well,
For the
thanks.
first time in my life,
Thanks. Draw a veil over that because you're not allowed to swear on the air. You'll only put us in trouble, Jonathan. I'm sorry that the cigarettes have got you that way. Here's George in Airdrie. Go ahead, George.
Hello, Mr. Galloway.
Hi, sir.
It's just a quick point. I don't necessarily think that the unions are playing it right with a strike on the 30th of November. I obviously agree that their pensions should be held as they are, but the private sector workers now are obviously not getting anywhere near what their pensions are, and like you say, that's not. We shouldn't be attacking other people's pensions.
Yeah, but George, let me correct you for a start. They're not. Private sector pensions are not less than the dinner lady's pension, than the school cleaner's pension, than the NHS workers' pension. They are not. Insofar as they are, it's in places in the private sector where there are no unions that were never able to negotiate private pensions for their workers in the first place. This is a totally false dichotomy that the Tories have introduced into this to try and turn private sector workers against public sector workers. You heard the woman, George. You heard Heather. The pension is £2,800 a year for Unison's women workers, and the average for local government workers is £4,000 a year, for which they've made their contribution.
Yeah.
Go on. Sorry, I interrupt you. Go on.
No. The point taken. All I'm trying to say is, I misspoke. What I'm trying to say is the perception in the private sector is that way.
That's right.
And it's just that they're going to turn more people against them because a lot of people are very easily manipulated through media and the things that.
Yeah. Well, we've heard that already today. But what else can they do? What else can they do, George?
I don't know. This is the problem. I don't necessarily believe that striking on the 30th of November, you know, that'll the amount of workers that are going to strike, that'll grind the country to a halt. And I don't know at this point in time whether that'll get them any kind of major.
Well, no, but won't it remind people of how important you see, if I went on strike, well, maybe not me. If some radio presenters went on strike, nobody would miss them. If the bankers went on strike, if the stock exchange staff went on strike, if TV pundits went on strike, if newspaper leader writers went on strike, nobody would care. But when the dinner lady's on strike, or the nurse is on strike, or the bus driver is on strike, everybody notices it. And maybe it will remind people of the absolutely vital job that these workers do.
Yeah, you would think that, Mr. Galloway, but I'm not so sure that would be the case. Not a lot of people look at it in that kind of way.
No, well, that's the struggle, George, that you and I have to engage in, those of us who believe in that, at least. 08717 223344, that's the number to call. And you can text at 81089 for 50 pence plus normal sending charges. You can write free of charge through the website at talksport.co.uk. And don't forget, you can follow me on Twitter and on Facebook. The Church of England and City of London corporation officials have both delayed taking legal action against the protesters camped outside St Paul's Cathedral. The move came after a meeting between the anti-capitalist demonstrators and church leaders. The camp outside St Paul's has caused a rift within the Church of England after 3 resignations. One of the protesters, Robin Smith, says the vast majority of the public are fully behind their plight.
99% of them come up and shake my hand and say thank you very much for standing up for the working, enterprising, skillful and industrious people of this world. They're sick and tired of their wages being reduced to a minimum while parasites in society collect.
Well, he sounds a likely lad. Robin Smith, excellent contribution, brilliant, succinct summary of the case, really, the 99% case. Now, this Occupy movement has spread throughout the world, and you may have noticed the extraordinary events in Oakland, California, in the last 3 days, where the port of Oakland, the 5th busiest port in the United States, through which billions of dollars worth of trade passes every week, was closed down by a picket of 15,000 people in the Occupy movement in Oakland. I was talking to one of their organisers today for my television programme, which goes out on Sunday night. On my television programme last night, my next guest made an appearance, and a very good one. He's Spyro Van Leeman from Occupy London. So let's talk to him. Spyro, nice to talk to you again, my friend.
Hi there, good evening. How are you?
I'm well, and good to talk to you. I was just saying that this movement, of course, is a global one, but there's been a tremendous amount of publicity on the Occupy London camp. So tell us this rather chilly Friday evening, how things are going down there at the camp.
Well, obviously, we're still celebrating what we call victory, because we got away with basically not having St. Paul's and the Corporation of London take illegal action against us, which is obviously positive, and we can now focus on the reasons why we're there, because obviously the last couple of weeks we've seen the media focusing on the issue with the church, which wasn't our intention in the first place.
No, of course. You only ended up on the steps, as it were, of the church because the police kettled you there.
That's right, yes. We turned up with the intention to occupy Paternoster Square, which is where the London Stock Exchange is based, as well as the headquarters of Goldman Sachs. However, when we turned up there, the square was closed by the police, and apparently belongs to Mitsubishi Estates. So we were kettled, as you said, around St. Paul's Cathedral, and this is where we ended up setting the camp. And
the church, or at least its spokespeople, have been indicating that business has crashed for them. Few of us knew that you had to pay money, big money, £14, to be a worshipper in St. Paul's. They say that their takings in the cafeteria and so on are down, the souvenir shop are down. I'm not sure what Jesus would make of all of that. But you, on the other hand, seem to be having something of a boom in donations. Tell us about that.
Well, I'm not really involved in... we have different working groups. The working group that is responsible for accepting the donations, I'm not involved in that. But we have received donations, all from individuals, which is also very positive. We started receiving donations from day one, actually. We had people bringing food and water. When I slept the first night of the 15th of October, I woke up on the 16th, and there was already a kitchen operating with free breakfast for everyone, and real community spirit has been built up the past couple of weeks.
How does the day go then? Talk us through a typical day.
We haven't had a typical day yet because of everything that's happening, all the issues with the cathedral, but we still have the daily general assemblies, two assemblies a day. This is the decision-making process that we use, where we all equal, and everyone is welcome to participate and add items to the agenda, and we take decisions by reaching consensus. So the decisions might be from practical issues such as the camp, as well as more broader issues such as what we stand for and all these things, and that's the beautiful thing about it, that it's not just people who sleep there who are participating, but there are people who come on a lunch break or after work, because as I said, we have two general assemblies a day, one at 2 and one at 7. This is working quite well so far, and it's been working in all the other occupations around the world, Wall Street, and now we are working towards bringing together all those ideas and find a way to collaborate between the different occupations around the world.
Well, Spyro, the very best of luck. My regards to all there camped out at St. Paul's Cathedral. That was Spyro Van Leeman, who is one of the protesters who's out there in the cold at St. Paul's. Let's take John in Bexley Heath. First of all, John, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hello, George.
Hi.
Thank you very much for taking my call.
Not at all.
You're still supporting United?
Still supporting?
United?
Oh, yes, for sure, yes.
Good.
Alex Ferguson, the GLS, the greatest living Scotsman.
Yeah, well.
25 years, my goodness.
He's done a magnificent job.
Oh, no one's ever done better.
Anyway, George, getting back to something you said a few moments ago, you said that if people on the radio like yourself were to leave tomorrow, including yourself, no one would miss you. Well, I can assure you, George, I've got a lot of friends who listen to the programme, and when you left a couple of years ago, I think it was now, is it?
Yeah, I left for the election, and I was off for rather longer than I expected, yeah.
Well, wasn't there a time when you left before and didn't come back for a long time?
No, 2005, I had to give up for the course of the general election, but it turned out to be, as I say, a few months longer than that, John.
Oh, right. That must be the one then.
Yeah.
Well, I can assure you, George, I and all my friends missed you terribly. In fact, we missed you so much that most of us didn't even bother to listen to TalkSport on a Friday night.
Well, I hope the boss is listening. John, thanks very much for that really, really kind call. I must genuinely thank you for that, most sincerely. Here's Sean in Netherley on Merseyside. Sean, welcome to the show.
Hello, George.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, nice to speak to you.
And you.
I've always been a great admirer of your career. I've followed us through the years.
Thank you.
I remember you on the O'Reilly Factor in America.
Oh, yes, on Fox News,
great.
yes.
But I've got one little criticism, and I was very disappointed when you called a caller who had a different point of view to yours. You called it a smart aleck, and you never really gave him a chance to explain his...
I gave him he was 7 minutes on the radio, but anyway, go on.
But the main point I'm ringing about is the crisis in Greece, and the fact that people forget about the reason the compact was set up originally was to bring peace in Europe. And Merkel, the German Chancellor, she messaged the other day, and people thought, hello, she's talking about war and all the rest of it. But the original idea was the fact that it was set up to bring peace in Europe. Now, we've had peace for 50 years, bringing all the European countries together to look at a way that we would never have any more wars. Now, this is why today we've got to be very patient and listen to the politicians who are trying to sort this mess out and not jump to conclusions.
But, Sean, these are the politicians that got us into the mess.
We know that, but we're all to blame, George. Everyone must take the blame.
Why?
It's all right blaming politicians.
What did the dinner lady do to create this? What did the school cleaner do to create this mess?
Well, we all do.
What did the nurse do to create this mess?
Listen, George, I was a postman. I worked all my life.
Well, what did a postman do to cause this mess?
Well, we have in our own little way. We've all fell into the little comfort zone, and we've had a great...
I don't buy that at all, Sean, and I'm going to deal with your substantive point, but it'll have to be after the break. But on your first point, I'm a short sword fighter. People come on the radio with me, and they want to pick an argument, and I love it. And I like to think that they do too. But when I'm in an argument, I don't dance around. I don't pretend to believe one thing when actually I believe another. I don't believe in a short encounter on the radio I should do other than be myself. That's what's built the audience on this show to the massive proportions that it has reached. And I can't, in any meaningful sense, apologize for it. Smart Alec, I thought he was a smart Alec. And when I learned he was a hotel manager, well, I wasn't surprised at that. What I was surprised at is that he's a hotel manager on £17,000 a year with no pension. He ought to be smart and get himself a better gig than that, as I'm sure he could. Clive and Sittingbourne in Kent is up next, but it'll have to be after the news.
On DAB Digital Radio and 1089 and 1053 AM. The Week with George Galloway on TalkSport.
You're listening to The Week with me, George Galloway. I'm here every Friday night between 10 and 1 o'clock in the morning. My phone number always is 08717 223344. 08717 223344. Or you can text me on 81089 for 50 pence plus normal sending charges. I need your texts, not the least on the song suggestion with which we can play out the show. Or you can email that or any other point of view through the website entirely free of charge at talksport.co.uk. We're talking about public sector pensions. We're talking about the Occupy London movement from the steps of St. Paul's Cathedral. Shortly we'll be talking to Matt O'Connor, founder of Fathers for Justice, about the new Norgrove report, which Matt thinks has dealt a severe blow to the prospects of huge numbers of children in the country who deserve, indeed need, a father in their lives. And we'll be talking to John Simmons, who's the Director of Policy Research and Development for the British Association of Adoption and Fostering. This in the wake of the report that only 60 children in England were adopted in the year to March 2011. And in the last hour, oh, what a treat. We've got the great Mark Steele sitting in, talking about his new book and taking one or two calls before repairing for an early bed, as is his wont. 08717 223344. That's the number to call me. It's George Galloway. It's the week, so it must be TalkSport.
The Week with George Galloway on TalkSport.
Now, Lee in Milton Keynes says, George, teachers have an easy life. Maybe all the truck drivers should go on strike over wages. Then you'll see the country come to a standstill. Well, what's stopping you, Lee? If you're not happy with your wages, why don't you? You know you'll get my support. Neil in Birmingham says, in the media, it's mainly said that public sector workers will have to pay more contributions and for longer. It's rarely stated that they will receive less at the end of it. Most people probably assume it's for a better or at least similar payout. And Kevin in Plymouth says private sector workers blaming their low pay and poor conditions on the public sector is like a victim of robbery blaming his neighbour because he has better locks and alarms. It makes more sense to blame the robbers. And one more for now. Asif says, George, the stunning statistic that 70% of public sector workers earn less than $21,000 a year is a fact you just don't hear in the mainstream media. And then newspapers like The Telegraph have the cheek to refer to gold-plated public sector pensions. Great to see the comic genius Mark Steele back on the show. Fantastic show as ever. Best wishes, Asif. Thanks for that, Asif. The only small consolation is that most of the journalists who scribble such hate speak against workers when they're trying to defend their wages and conditions have probably already or may soon be laid off by their own employers, just to save a bit of money. Now, Clive in Sittingbourne, he disagrees with me on the public sector workers. That's why he's up next. Clive, welcome to the show.
Hello, George.
Hi there. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, well, I think that the public sector have probably had it too good for too long, to be honest with you.
What, the dinner ladies?
Well, you say dinner ladies, but I mean, you're only pointing out
well,
one area.
Well, okay, we'll go through them seriatim. We'll go through them. No, hold on. We'll go through them seriatim.
Okay.
Have the dinner ladies had it too good for too long?
My personal opinion with that is it's not a very skilled job. They shouldn't expect to be overly well paid.
And what is your skilled job, Clive?
I'm an electrician. I don't earn a bad wage, but I'm not, hugely rewarded.
Yeah. So if I told you that the pension for a dinner lady is £2,800 a year, you'd think that was too good for too long, would you?
Right. I'm not saying that particular dinner lady isn't.
All right. Well, let's leave the dinner. Let's leave the dinner ladies. Let's leave the dinner ladies. Clive. Okay. Let's leave the dinner ladies and go on to nurses.
Right. Okay.
Do you think that a nurse who used to retire at 60 on a given pension, who now has to retire at 68 for less of a pension, whilst paying more for it, do you think she's had it too good for too long?
I can imagine why she's going to be upset by that, but
quite.
I'm realistic.
That's all I'm asking you to imagine.
I'm realistic that I'm going to have to work longer. I'm paying more taxes from now.
Yeah, but how will how will making the nurse do it make your lot any better, Clive?
At the end of the day, we've got to pay our taxes for these people to get it later on in life. People are living longer. Youngsters are going to school and education for longer.
Is that not a good thing? Are these two things not something to celebrate?
Yeah, but you obviously know that for this country to work, people have got to be paying taxes. If there's...
Oh, I agree with that. There's a lot of electricians don't pay their taxes. I know a lot of them.
I can show you my wage slips.
No, I believe you. I'm sure you pay your taxes, but there's quite a few electricians don't.
I know, but we need to be realistic that the country's, it's having problems at the
but
moment.
that wasn't the nurse's fault, was it?
No, it's not, but I'm going to be paying more money
Well,
for
right,
it.
but why
And
should
I think
electricians pay more for the sins of bankers and politicians? Why?
Even with that, I would say with bankers, they earn a lot more money than us. They pay a lot more tax than me.
Do they, Clive?
Well,
you obviously don't know much. You obviously don't know much about bankers.
Apart from the very clever ones.
Well, bankers generally are pretty clever, and precious few of them are paying their due in tax. I promise you that.
Well, maybe...
You see, the point I'm trying to get you to face, trying to persuade you of this point, is that neither the electrician, nor the dinner lady, nor the nurse are responsible for the economic mess in this country.
I think we need to be more realistic as a country, to be honest. I mean, you may have some sort of figures. What percentage of our country is actually tax-paying, officially?
Well, there's 100 billion a year, according to the Liberal Democrats, before the election, being avoided or evaded in tax by the top earners in the country. Our entire deficit could be paid off in 1 year if those people paid their taxes. Now, nurses pay their taxes. So do dinner ladies. So do most electricians, including you. But the richest people in our country avoid or even evade taxation. The richest people...
It's illegal what they're doing. Because
well, if they're avoiding it, it's not illegal. If they're evading it, it is illegal. But either way, more than 100 billion a year is being lost to the exchequer by people dodging taxes. Now, what I'm saying to you is, why isn't your ire concentrated on the big thieves rather than wishing ill on a dinner lady?
I don't wish ill on anybody. I would like to see everybody, from the bottom to the very top, be equally open-minded about the fact that we've all got to be paying more, in the same respect that there's a lot of people I see there that aren't working, that should be working.
No, but see, I knew that's what you were getting to. There's millions of people unemployed in this country. Who knows, Clive? God forbid. You might soon be one of them yourself. Certainly plenty of building workers are. Now, the idea that the crisis in this country has been caused by the people who've been sacked from their jobs through no fault of their own is, of course, another of the propaganda ploys of the Daily Mail and the Sun, whose purpose is to turn you, the electrician, against the nurse, to turn the black against the white, to turn the public sector against the private sector. Can't you see, Clive, that that's what's going on?
A lot of that has just been the way it's been for years, to be honest with you. Coloured workers don't like people like myself that are...
Did you say coloured workers there, Clive?
I'm deemed to be stupid because I don't wear a tie, but, that's just what I encounter every day myself. But
well, I certainly wouldn't call you stupid for not wearing a tie. Here's Chris in Bognor Regis. He supports the public sector workers. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, my Lord, George, my Lord. Some of these council house Tories you get on tonight, it makes you want to weep, doesn't it?
I don't know whether to laugh or cry.
Oh, I'm crying, mate. I'm just crying, honestly. Well, the point I've got to make is, George, is a simple one. Some of these people are coming on to you tonight, attacking public service workers for defending their pensions, right? How many of them took endowment policies out and have managed to sue the companies who missold them. It's the same principle. When it didn't pay out what they said it was going to pay out.
Yeah, good point.
And there's millions of people in this country do it. So why are public sector workers treated any differently to those people?
Well, you see, Chris, what I should have said to the last guy, the building worker, the electrician, to get a copy of Robert Tressel's Ragged Trousered Philanthropist. 111 years ago that book was written.
Yeah.
And the hero of the book, amongst his workmates, is dealing with exactly the same divide and rule propaganda that is clearly still confusing some building workers 111 years later. Am I right?
So sad, mate. So sad. And I'll tell you what, and about educating people, we can't educate people in this country no more because we've made it too expensive for the average youngster to go to university.
Well, that's right, and the numbers are already falling.
And that's exactly, and the establishment will survive because of that.
And we've got truck drivers,
yeah,
or one truck driver. I must say, my experience of truck drivers is they've got rather more sense, saying that teachers have it easy, and that teaching isn't a real job.
Well,
it's unbelievable, Chris.
Totally unbelievable, George. But keep the fight up, mate. And
absolutely.
By the way, the greatest living Scotsman, you're doing yourself down.
Thank you very much, Chris. Very, very kind of you. No, Fergie's the champ so far as that's concerned. Chris in Bognor Regis, very grateful for that call. Peter in Blackburn's up next, but after this. Now, Matt O'Connor is founder of Fathers for Justice. He says that divorced fathers are to be denied a legal right to a relationship with their children in a review of family law. He thinks that this will feed fatherlessness and social unrest, condemn tens of thousands more children to losing contact with their fathers with serious social consequences. 1 in 3 children in the United Kingdom, he says, is fatherless, and the group claim that fatherless young boys and men were a contributory factor in the summer riots. Matt has also announced in the wake of the Family Justice Review that he's going to launch a new political party in January. He says it's founded on 3 key principles: protecting families, defending liberties, and building a better tomorrow free from the politics of the past. Well, we'll come on to that, but first I'd like to talk to Matt about this new report. Matt, welcome to the show, my friend.
Good evening, George. How are you, sir?
Yes, very well. Tell me, this is quite swinging criticism you've made of this Norbridge report. Tell me why you think it's so bad, first of all, yeah?
Well, I think it's quite astonishing that, for 10 years, George, I've been telling people that fathers have no right in law in this country to see their children. And for 10 years, I don't think people have really genuinely believed what I've said and what the tens of thousands of people involved in this campaign have said. And not only has it now been confirmed that we have no right to see our children, they've actually said this is a good thing and it should continue. And it is astonishing.
Now, do you mean, Matt, no rights per se, or that a court can take away your rights?
You have no right in law in this country to see your children. In fact, the government's position, and the previous Labour government's position is the same as the Conservative government's position, or the Conservative coalition government's position, is this: the government does not believe that a legal presumption to contact would be helpful. What that means is that if you are living with your wife or your partner on a Saturday, and you're home with the kids, you're watching Doctor Who and doing all normal family things, there's an argument, you separate, you move out, you have to go to court to prove to a court that it's in your child's best interests for them to see you. And when you start talking about the child's best interest, really here is the cruel deceit, the wicked deceit at the heart of family law is this. They say they act in the child's best interest. They make that claim, but nobody ever has kept any records on the outcomes for the children and been to the court system to prove it. And when I confronted David Norgrove this week, face-to-face at the BBC, very politely, very calmly, I am house-trained, and I said to David, where is your empirical evidence to make this wild claim that you are acting in the child's best interest? And he said to me, Matt, the judges think they're acting in the child's best interest. And these are judges, unelected, unaccountable, unsackable judiciary. It's a regime that would make the regimes in Iran or North Korea blush with the kind of secrecy and censorship they impose upon fathers and families. So I'm utterly, utterly disgusted that I live in a country that sends fathers off to fight phony wars in different parts of the world on behalf of a country that doesn't even afford them the right to be a father, George. And that's what makes me upset, and that's what makes me angry.
Well, I mean, understandably, I think. Tell us how many people this affects.
We're talking 200 children a day in the secret family courts who lose contact with their children. As 500,000 families going into the court system. We live in a country where 1 in 3 children is now growing up without a father. This is not some small problem you can sweep under the carpet, as this report tries to do. It says, oh, the vast majority of couples sort it out. It's not really an issue. It's only like 10%.
Well, do they, Matt? I mean, what have you got evidence to the contrary of that?
Yeah, well, their evidence is so flimsy you could drive a coach and horses for it. It doesn't stand up. It doesn't bear any scrutiny. The 10% figure that people rely on is from a tiny sample of less than 100 parents taken about 5 years ago for a government report. It's a piece of propaganda that's been spun and spun and spun. You know, I know, everybody knows, at TalkSport, people I speak to there, know somebody who's going for an issue where there's contact problems with their children. Everybody can see the consequences. We saw it this summer.
Well, I've been in that situation twice.
Of course you have.
But I didn't have the problem that you indicate is common. That's why I'm asking you to persuade me of it. Because most women, even if they come to hate you, which can happen, Matt, know that it can't be in their child's interest to keep them from their father. No?
Well, I disagree.
Really?
I mean, George, I can't...
Maybe I've just been lucky.
I can't tell you, if you could... Well, I think you'd be... George, you must be... You're only gorgeous, you're also incredibly lucky. but you know, if that was the case, explain to me how 1 in 3 children are growing up in fatherless families.
Well, of course, there could be...
Explain to me where the fathers are, George, of the rioting children in this country we saw during the summer. The police are saying... Where are the fathers?
I'm with you on that entirely. I mean, I do think that fatherlessness is a very major contributory factor to the problems that we've got in the country. I think that broken homes,
most important
well, maybe
thing, George.
Probably poverty would beat it, but
that causes poverty. Fatherlessness causes poverty.
Well, it
can
certainly
families,
can. Yeah.
You put your families onto benefits, mothers and children onto benefits.
Yeah.
What I like to see, and I'm sure you agree on this, if you put fathers. Yeah, I think Benjamin Desmond said on Question Time last night, how you can't expect fathers to have responsibilities without giving them rights. We want to see responsibilities with rights. We think that's in the interest of our children, families, socially, economically. It makes absolute common sense.
So basically your position is the presumption in law should be equal access, and if the wife... It's mainly the wife that's left with the kids in these breakups. If the wife wants it to be otherwise, she should have to go to the court. Yeah?
We want to see a presumption of equality where both parents are treated equally in the eyes of the law, and we believe the best parent for a child is both parents. And I think if the law was unequivocal about this, we think actually the whole number of cases going to the court system will drop away. There is delusion, and if you listen to the language of the report, David Norgrove's Family Justice Review report, it's spoken in this kind of calm, reassuring language with the ears of vested interest in mind. People who are making money and property from the misery of families who go into this dreadful secretive regime, this brutal regime, and we go on about regimes around the world, and we have our own secretive star chamber operating in this so-called progressive modern democracy in the 21st century. It's quite incredible. And yet they say, it's kind of okay. It's not okay. This is an abusive system. It is the biggest child abuse scandal in the history of this country, that we allow children to go to court system where we pitch parent against parent, where it's predicated on conflict. Because to prove that the best parent is George, you have to prove the worst is. And it's the court play.
Well, that's a powerful case, and you're a powerful advocate, I must say, and I don't have time to deal with the second part of the premise here, because I've got to take a break for the news. But, Matt, take a bit of advice from me. Don't form your own political party. 08717 223344, that's the number to call me. 81089 is the number to text me or write to me free through the website at talksport.co.uk. Manchester United manager Sir Alex Ferguson has been speaking at the Unite Union conference today about the importance of apprenticeships. He says it's time we invested more in young people.
We're always going to need plumbers, we're always going to need electricians, we're always going to need carpenters. So why should we allow it to go outside the country? We can develop our youth for these skilled jobs quite easily. All we need is impetus, the drive, and the support for the government.
The greatest living Scotsman, Sir Alex Ferguson, who was once a leader of an apprentice strike on the Clyde. He's supported trade unionism all of his life. And here's a memo to some of the falsely conscious out there. Sir Alex Ferguson is now a multi-millionaire, but he was speaking at a union conference today in support of apprenticeships. Think. Here, up next, is our next guest. He's John Simmons, Director of Policy Research and Development for the British Association for Adoption and Fostering. This in the wake of the Times reporting that only 60 children under 12 months old were adopted in the year to March 2011. In total, just 3,050 children were placed for adoption, a fall of 5% on the previous year, and that there are 60,000 children in England living in local authority care. Some, on the face of it, rather depressing statistics. Let's see what John thinks. John, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
John, I mean, is this as bleak a picture as it looks to me? Should I not be as surprised as I am by these numbers?
They're more complex than they sound. I think the first thing is the greater majority of children in care, probably about 58% are adolescents, so they're over 11s. The likelihood, in fact, their own views about being adopted are probably that wouldn't be right for them. So we're not thinking about the entire looked after children population. We're thinking about a group of much younger children, probably about 42% of the care population, and particularly children under 5.
So that's 25,000 plus in England.
Yeah, but about, of children in care, about just under 11,000 will go back home. It's right that at the moment about 3,000 leave care to go to adoption. There are just under 2,000 will leave care under a special guardianship order. That's a new order. It's not quite adoption, but it's meant to be a permanent for life placement. Another 1,500 or so will leave care under a residence order. So it's the focus on adoption. It's right that there's a focus on adoption, and there should be concern about the falling away of the adoption figures. But it's a more complex picture than just that. One of just over 3,000 children leaving through adoption.
Well, life is always more complex than it looks in the Times. But the fall-off is one issue, and the different performance, if I can call it that, in different local authorities. These are two causes for concern, aren't they? 5% drop this year in the number of adoptions, and Hackney Council, for example, getting a 43% score of children placed in adoption or foster care, whilst other local authorities in better off parts of the country, dare I say, gaining as much as 100%.
Yes. Well, there were a series of measures in those league tables. There's one measure which actually says that, quite rightly, that between a child having a plan for adoption to the point at which they're placed for adoption, that should be 12 months. So one of those figures was about the percentage of local authorities that actually managed to place those children within that 12-month timescale. And yes, there is a very significant difference between the best and the worst. And then there was another figure, which was the percentage of children of the total care population that were actually placed. And again, there was a big divergence between the best and the worst in that as well. And again, it's not as straightforward as it looks. Different local authorities have different population profiles. If you look at some of the local authorities at the bottom end of the scale, like Hillingdon, Solihull, Kent, they will have very large numbers of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children because they are reception areas for those children. So, and those children won't be available for adoption. So comparing those kinds of local authorities with local authorities which have other kinds of profiles is not strictly helpful.
Well, what about the one I gave you, Hackney, versus, I've got it in my notes somewhere, there's one local authority that got 100%.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that every local authority needs to do is to explore and try to explain both to itself and to the public at large about why its figures appear in the way that they do. But we have to accept that, for some that will be a justifiable reason. They will be able to say, because of the profile of our area, the children that are in care, our own particular policies and objectives for those policies, that this is why we differ. But where it's not possible to justify it, then it's really important that that a proper plan is put in place.
Well, can you justify it? Can you tell me why? Yeah. You're sounding, if you don't mind my saying so, like the archetypal Guardian leader writer.
Yes.
Can you deal with this dichotomy that 43% is the figure in Hackney and 100% is the figure in York?
Yes. No, I can't explain it from any particular local authority's point of view, except that they will say, if you were talking to one of the authorities with a large unaccompanied asylum-seeking children population, they would say that because we have so many of those...
Sure. That I get, but that's not Hackney. Hackney isn't
Well, I think that Hackney are... I know that Hackney have argued that the profile of their children, that they're placing large numbers of children in sibling groups, and that's not uncommon today, large numbers of children with disabilities, large numbers of children with complex special needs, and that they do take longer to find a suitable adoptive placement for than younger babies without those complex needs. That's the argument in Hackney.
What about the drop-off, this 5% fall? Are there fewer parents seeking to adopt? I don't think so.
No. I think that is of real concern. But one of the issues about those kinds of figures that we also need to look not just at what local authorities are doing, but what is happening in the courts as well. And because most children available for adoption today, they start off coming into care under child protection concerns. They will be received into care and placed in foster care. The local authority will then issue care proceedings, which means that the case will be heard in court, and it will be for the court to actually make a decision about what the best long-term plan for the child is. And courts have their own views about those kinds of things, and of course it will actually be a contested case. The child's parents will have their own views about what the best thing is, and normally that will mean they will want the child returned to them, and the local authority will have to present evidence about why it thinks that shouldn't happen, and what the court actually decides in the end is either that the child goes back home or that they sever the legal links between the child and the parents, and the child then becomes available for adoption or one of the other permanence orders that's available to us. So there's a very complex process that goes on between local authorities and the courts in the context of these contested care proceedings, and that's one of the explanations why numbers have gone down, gone down by 5%. Now, I'm not justifying that. I think that that we need to do more to make sure that both the courts and local authorities work well together, so that where there is good reason for a child to be placed for adoption, that happens, and that happens quickly.
Now, what role, if any, is played in this story by race? We hear or read in the tabloids from time to time a kind of an attack on local authorities because they're refusing to place, for example, black children with white with foster parents or adoptive parents. Is that in this mix?
Yes, it is in this mix. I mean, there have never been rules about that. There's nothing that stops local authorities placing black children with white families, and that's been so. Well, that's always been so. But there is evidence, and there's particularly evidence from those people that were placed in transracially, black people placed transracially. They've grown up, and that they've raised quite serious questions, not about the care that they've received from their adoptive parents, but the extent to which they feel comfortable with and identify with, and to put it kind of a bit crudely, the black community. They feel that they're neither white nor that do they actually belong to a black community either. And because that issue has been raised so many times by transracially adopted black adults, adoption agencies will try to think about, given the range of needs that this child actually has, given the available doctors that we have, can we find an adoptive family that reflects or can promote the child's ethnicity and culture, and to what degree do we need to make sure that an endless search for the right match doesn't compromise that issue of placing children as quickly as possible. So it's not a straightforward issue. It is an issue which is based on feedback from transracially placed adults, but it's absolutely essential that that if a suitable match can't be found quickly, that the local authority actually explores the range of adopters that are available. Yeah. So I don't think it's not as crude an issue as it's often presented, particularly in the press.
Now, just tell me this, John, finally. The thought of children in local authority care pierces my heart. Yeah. I have a very bad picture in my mind about what that means. But I may be wrong also about that. What does it mean for a child under 12 months or under 4 to be in local authority care? I mean, are you in a home?
No. Most children, the greater proportion of children are in foster care. That it's extremely unusual for a child under the age of 10 to be in residential care in a children's home. That the greater proportion of under 10-year-olds will be in foster care. And those foster carers will be carefully selected, they will be properly trained and supported to understand the needs of children, and that arrangement should be a temporary arrangement until the local authority and the courts actually sort out a longer-term arrangement.
John, it's been a pleasure talking to you. You've very carefully and very even-handedly, in a Guardian sort of way, and I'm a Guardian type of man myself, explained some of the complexities, at least, around this issue. I found it very interesting. I hope that the listeners did too. This is George Galloway. This is The Week. Therefore, it must be TalkSport. Yoko Ono is campaigning to raise awareness of childhood hunger and poverty. At the launch of the Imagine There's No Hunger campaign in New York's Times Square, John Lennon's widow revealed the classic song Imagine didn't get a great reception at first.
The fact that John created that song at the time, we thought it was really beautiful thing that he did, but at the same time, it was not really accepted as, it wasn't wow. And now I think it's very important. It's a very important song.
Well, I don't doubt that John, had he been alive, would be out there in Wall Street in the Occupy movement, or perhaps over in Oakland with the people there in Northern California. Hi, George. I think the teachers should pipe down. Whilst I'm sweating it out at work this Christmas on my postal route, they'll be swanning around in their slippers without a care in the world. And don't get me started on their summer holidays. Makes my blood boil. Thanks. Groovy Steve, the posty-wosty with the mosty. And a sad granny, Lily, says, Hi, Gigi, my daughter banned me from seeing my grandchildren because I told her not to involve them in her divorce or to stop contact with their dad. He's a great dad, worked hard for 25 years to give them the best. She has a new man and stopped contact with their dad. This is not in the kids' interest at all. Women are now given a green light to deny access to good dads. That's a very sad story, I must say. Matt says, I'm Matt from Leeds, and I've been fighting for 2 years now to see my children, and I agree with Matt. I had to go to court and prove that I should have a right to see my kids. I divorced my wife, not my kids, and I fully back Matt. And Barry says, great debate, George, great eloquence from you as usual. Nurses, dinner ladies, truck drivers, etc. should be on the same side. Only a united front will prevail. Thanks, Barry. And Alex Bernard in Wellingborough says, hi, Mr. Galloway, first-time texter. I'm on the public sector workers' side. I feel sorry that some workers, like the police, can't strike. Nobody wants to strike, but do so as a last resort. I also say that people are misguided or jealous of teachers. It's the children on 6 or 7 week summer holidays, not them. I used to vote Labour until they did away with their socialist values, and I'm a Catholic of 3 years now. I was unbaptised before 5th of July 2008. I think the C of E should be ashamed. They should be out there with the protesters, considering the C of E was itself formed by protesters. Very interesting. And Claire in Warwickshire says, has anyone ever considered offering babies for adoption to recently bereaved parents? Nothing can replace a lost baby, but it may give new purpose to those parents and help the recovery process by loving an adopted child who desperately needs those loving parents. And Rob in Farnham says, George, I never agreed with you on anything in years, but you persuaded me to agree with you tonight on why do we attack dinner ladies when rich people are evading tax. You got me. But I think we should not make this a Tory versus Labour issue. I'm a Tory voter, but you've got me on your side. Re the dinner lady argument. We need intelligent debate, not Tory versus the rest. Keep up good persuasive arguments. Well, thanks very much, Rob in Farnham. That is cheering. Here is Carol in Bow on adoption and public sector workers. Carol, welcome back.
Hi, George.
Hi.
And you was just saying Fergie's the greatest living Scotsman. I think you are.
Oh, Carol, how nice. Thank you very much.
Why is it the working classes are so ignorant with their attack on the low-paid? I can't understand this. Why aren't they attacking the earners? You know, the crooks who are evading the tax.
Yeah.
You know, who evade more in a week than a dinner lady can earn in a lifetime.
Exactly, yeah.
It's frustrating.
Yeah.
So frustrating.
Yeah. Well, it's because of the sea of confusing propaganda that is deployed through all kind of mediums to basically throw sand in people's eyes, isn't it? It's our job to try and clean their eyes of the sand.
Well, it's sad that there's 4,000 kids waiting to be adopted at any one time, any one place. But I'm going through the process now, not to adopt, to foster, because, my goodness, it takes months and months and months.
Well, I suppose they've got to get it right, don't they? Or would be on their back if they were handing out children willy-nilly.
But it's not foster carers that are killing the children.
No, it's the natural parents, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the time, it goes on and on and on, and waiting for courts, waiting for everything. But I know they've got to get it right. But you were saying about why is it certain areas are better for fostering, better for adopting? It's housing. Housing's got to be a prime factor. If you're in a city, I'm not, you know...
Yeah, you're not going to have the room.
Hundreds of thousands of parents in the inner city who would be good for foster caring. But if they're living in a 2-bedroom tower block, they're not going to be accepted. You know, all of a sudden, you know, that's a criteria for fostering and adopting. You won't get a child, you know? So housing, school places, all these things are factors when they take into consideration going out there. So I suppose areas where it's quite affluent or there's more bigger houses or bigger homes, maybe that's, I don't know.
No, it's a very good point, Carol. I'm sure that has something to do with it. Thanks for that wonderful call. Here's Nigel in Leicestershire on the same subject. Go ahead, Nigel.
Hello, George.
Hi, sir.
It's good to finally speak to you about this matter. I have emailed you and written to you before about it.
Go ahead.
Ask the question,
Yeah.
Why is there so many children in waiting for adoption,
Yeah.
and only 60 actually getting adopted?
Yeah.
Well, number one, I don't believe that's actually the case. I believe that's a false figure.
It is.
And
It's not a false figure, but it's a misleading figure, as the
It is.
gentleman from the association pointed out.
Yeah. The reason for it is quite simple. There are two reasons. Number one, the Baby P case, which puts social workers into a position where they're so frightened to make a mistake
Yeah.
that they are now targeting families, poor families, ex-criminals, ex-alcoholics, all kinds of people throughout the country are currently losing their children into care. The figure I heard the gentleman say was 70,000 children are currently in care.
60,000.
Yeah, 60,000.
Yeah.
Well, add another 79,000 who are in interim care, which is where they are placed into a foster care placement on an interim basis. These foster carers are making £400 and £500 per child per week. The central government have gave targets to local governments. If they reach those local government, if the local governments reach those targets, George, they are paid a bonus. These are children we're talking about, and they're talking about bonuses for local authorities placing a certain amount of children into adoption. It's not foster care they're looking to put them into, it's adoption, because agencies such as CORAM and other agencies run by ex-social workers and judges, by the way, George, they pay huge amounts for children to be adopted through them.
Well,
and it's a money-making scheme, George. It's
Well,
a
I tell you
scandal.
what, Nigel, I didn't know most of that, and this has been a brilliant and illuminating call. I just put this to you as you seem like a man who knows what he's talking about. If we put a fraction of that money into supporting families in trouble with problems, maybe there wouldn't be so many children in care or interim care in the first place. I mean,
Absolutely right, George.
if we paid the
Absolutely
granny not £500 a week, but £200 a week, maybe the granny would be the best person to bring up the kid, or the auntie.
You're absolutely right, George. The problem also is the new buzzword within social services, which is emotional harm. Children aren't being placed into care anymore for sexually abusing, physically abusing, or mentally harming children. People are losing children today because they are anorexic. People are losing children because they may have had an alcohol problem. Social services have been told by government, you heard David Cameron only last week saying that this government is targeting 150,000 problem families in this country to provide them with help. That help, George, will be social services banging their door down with 3 or 4 police officers taking their children away from them, and they will do it in dawn raids, as they did in Tor Bay only 1 year ago, where they took 24 children from one council estate in one morning. Okay? And they're all home now.
Goodness me, it sounds like a Grimm's fairy tale, that one. Nigel, it's been a terrific call. Thanks for that. Nigel in Leicestershire, putting the cat amongst the pigeons, I suspect, on that subject. Paul in Blackburn says, George, public sector workers working longer will deny jobs to other people. Good point. Chrissy says, the myth about people living longer must be corrected. If you live in the north, you die years earlier than those who live in more prosperous south. Well, if you live in my former parliamentary constituency in inner city Glasgow, you will live 13 years less than you will if you're lucky enough to live in Kensington and Chelsea. I'll be back after the news with the final hour.
On DAB Digital Radio and 1089 and 1053 AM. The Week with George Galloway on TalkSport.
You're listening to The Week with me, George Galloway, on TalkSport every Friday night between 10 and 1 o'clock in the morning. My phone number, as always, is 08717 223344. You can text me for 50 pence plus normal sending charges on 81089. Or you can write to me free through the website at talksport.co.uk. We're talking about public sector pensions. We're talking about adoption and fostering. We're talking about parents, fathers, grandparents' rights. We're talking about the disastrous economic situation that we are slowly but surely sinking into in relation to the Occupy movements from London to Brisbane and from New York to California. But we've got a special treat, because in the next half hour we've got one of the country's funniest and best writers, Mark Steele, who's on tour promoting his new book, which I've been flicking through this last couple of hours, and I'll tell you this, it's up to his usual standard. And I mean that positively. Mark Steele's in the studio, and I'll be talking to him right after this.
The Week with George Galloway on TalkSport.
Now, Mark Steele sometimes occupies this seat and always does a terrific job when he does. He's a comedian. He's a writer. His TV and radio series include the Mark Steele Solution and the Mark Steele Lectures. He writes a weekly column for The Independent and has appeared several times on Have I Got News for You, and, implausibly, on Grumpy Old Men, for he is neither grumpy nor old. But he's also been on Room 101. His In Town series, which I heard several of on BBC Radio 4, won the Silver Award for Best Comedy at the Sony Radio Academy Awards in 2010, and the Writers Guild Award for Radio. His other books, all of which I've read and got, include It's Not a Runner Bean, Reasons to be Cheerful, Vive la Révolution, which brought the French Revolution absolutely to life in your living room, and What's Going On. He'd have written several more if he hadn't wasted his time wandering around record shops and trying to play cricket. He lives in Crystal Palace with an assortment of people he's related to. Mark, welcome very much to the show.
It's the most wonderful introduction I've ever had.
I mean every word of it, mate. I mean absolutely every word of it.
Well, now, just for a moment to continue the mutual admiration, I have to say, well, on behalf of my dear lady, who will be listening, Natasha, she's such a fan of this show. There have been times when we've been round someone's house and she's insisted that the show is put on.
To spoil the party.
Yeah, and the assembled company has had to sort of stop drinking and partying and put the
That's fantastic.
Put you on, yeah.
Oh, wonderful. I'm really happy to hear that. Well, look, tell me this. I heard several of those radio shows.
Right.
They were just brilliant.
Oh, well,
but
thanks.
It was a very audacious thing to do, to go to people's towns and basically insult them.
And basically insult them, yeah. Yeah, and it can, and I've always thought it could go wrong, this, because you slightly misjudge it, and I think I came quite near to it the other day, because last week I was in Douglas, Isle of Man, and now what's Douglas, what's the Isle of Man known for? TT, and being a sort of semi-tax haven.
Yeah, and birching, they used to birch
They
people.
did used to birch people, although, to be fair, they haven't birched anyone for quite a long while. But
a bit of gentle birching between consenting adults.
Yes,
of course.
well, I'm sure there's a bit of that. But I did say to him, look, the trouble is, we were birching people. It's no good going, it's a long while ago. It's like if that woman who put a cat in the wheelie bin in a few years says, look, I've made recipes. I'm quite good at bridge. All people go on about is me putting the cat in the wheelie bin.
Bin one cat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the opening line of the show was as follows. It's brilliant to be here in Douglas because it's lovely to be in a place that, even in a global recession, has got the positive outlook to invest in the one boom industry that's left, fiddling tax. And
silence? Was there silence?
No, there wasn't silence. There was the whole place booed. Angry, how dare you, booing.
And that was the opening line.
And that was the opening line. And my next line was, that's all from the show this week. And now on Radio 4, some solemn music. They were very pleasant, very sweet. There was lots of other funny things we could move on to, but I think, they were touchy about that.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I noticed at the time, and I notice it again now flicking through the book, is how, especially in places, I won't say off the beaten track, because that's disparaging. I mean, for those of us who live in London, everywhere is kind of provincial after London. But places that have perhaps developed a kind of defensiveness about themselves, how fiercely they feel that. I mean, the Keithley gag.
Yeah. Well, I've done that
truly
before.
instructive in that.
Yes,
Tell it again.
It was that I got to Skipton. I noticed that there was a town around the corner called Keighley, which I'm sure people may well have heard of. And I said to the audience, so is Keighley the rival town? And that's all I said, and it went absolutely. And I thought, oh, what have I done? And then this one woman, almost a spokesperson for the whole room, she went, Keighley is a sink of evil. With this magnificent menace. And,
well, it is funny, isn't it?
It was, I think this is, I suppose this, if there's a serious answer to the question about how you get away with it, in a sense, it's a bit like having a mate. You can have a mate, you can insult them all you like. They know that behind it, they're your mate. And I think you have to be, I don't think there's any way round the fact that you have to genuinely like somewhere. And if you genuinely like somewhere and you have an affection for the people there, then you can be rude about them and they know you're not sneering and they know you're not looking down at them.
No,
and that's what, it's funny enough, I was talking to Stuart McConey, who's written a sort of similar sort of books, and he said something the other day, he said, which I think is exactly right, he said, that's why, all of these people, when they get in trouble for insulting someone, or, they say something about the disabled or something about gays or something like that, and they go, I was only joking, and they're not, because that's why they got in trouble, because you could make those jokes if you did it in a sort of spirit whereby you are actually being sort of...
you see, that's one of the things,
There's a camaraderie to it, you know what I mean?
I get that. And in the bits I've seen of the book and the radio shows that I heard from which they're drawn, it's clear that because you're a sort of anti-globalization sort of guy, you are the kind of person who wants to protect and cherish the differences in the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I
that
think
every town doesn't look and feel the same.
Exactly. Now, I think there's a sort of almost a spirit of rebellion in them, in it. I mean, it's not, I can't pretend it's a theory that sort of I've necessarily worked out entirely, but just the fact that most obviously every high street is being made to look identical. It's almost as if the corporations that are designing our lives, they can't abide the thought that there's anything that's not been controlled by them. I don't mean that in a weird conspiratorial way, but and therefore the fact that there are, an independent record shop, for example, is almost an affront. Yeah, but it's an affront to the global corporations, if you like. I wouldn't exaggerate.
And
I'm not going to
Tescoization of
certainly Tesco. That's everywhere. I would say almost literally every place that I've been to, Tesco's has been an issue. There'll be a big body of people going, they want to build, there's 4 of them and they wanted to build a 5th one. We don't want them here, And it's sometimes portrayed that as a middle class campaign, but that's not necessarily the case. I mean, there was one quite near me in Croydon, which is certainly not middle class, and that was, there was an old disused pub and Tesco's wanted to turn it into another Tesco's and, there was quite a big campaign about it. I must just say, I was just reminded of this as I was coming in here. Do you remember the last time we were on here talking of conspiracy theories? Uh-huh. There was a brilliant guy who you interviewed, and he was a UFO spotter.
That's right, yes.
And the bit that I remembered, and I laugh every time I think about it, I laugh now, because he sounded quite lucid at first. He thought, all right, he's extraterrestrials or whatever. But then he said, now, the thing that I think you should take up, George, and you, Mark, both being people in the media, is people like myself who are close to becoming aware of the details of the imminence and the proximity of the extraterrestrials. We come under pressure from people under the state. They're onto us, and things happen. And you said, well, can you give us an example of the things that happen? And I swear this is true, you'll remember it. He said, just yesterday, George, I got an email from someone. I don't know who it was. For that is the lamest conspiracy theory.
Indeed. No, look, I mean, there's a lot, I mean, one of the things that shines out of the book, and shines out of that story you've just told, and out of this radio show in general, the phenomenon that it's become, that despite the homogenization drive, if you like, the globalization drive, corporatist drive, the country is still full of individuals.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Eccentrics and people of independent mind. And that seems to be the case across the country in the places that you have visited. They've somehow survived all of this.
Yeah, they have. I mean, if I get just one town, that I could give you two examples from one town, Walsall. Now, the funny thing is that loads of people in Walsall will say to you, if you're coming to Walsall, you've got to come and see our hippo. And they get very excited about the hippo. And it's a place that's had all sorts of shopping centre type places, shoved onto it. It really just would have ring roads and so on. It doesn't look like there's anything there quirky there at all. But the hippo, you've got to come and see the hippo, Mark. Fantastic, the Walsall hippo. I know, of course, when I was doing the show, I looked it up, and there's 3,000-4,000 friends of the hippo on Facebook. There's all manner of stories people tell about sitting around the hippo, in the summer and all this sort of thing. And I thought, it's going to be this huge, great, wonderful statue in the city centre. And I got to see it. It's literally 3 feet long. It's concrete and it's just a vague hippo shape. It could easily be, you could think, is it a bin? I couldn't believe, I honestly had to say, is that it? To the woman who was showing, yes, that's it, that is it. It's a hippo. But I was just, it really, and then, but bit by bit I thought, no, you know what, it's brilliant, because it's like they've decided, no, it's not got logos on it, it's not something that's been imported from outside, it's just there, and the people have decided that is something that's, they have...
It may be a hippo, but it's our hippo.
Exactly. And then one other thing, right opposite there is a statue of a woman called Sister Dora, who I'd never heard of. Have you come across her?
No.
And so I started finding out about her. I bought a book about her. Sister Dora was a nurse, working class woman who was a nurse in the 1850s, I believe. And she was the woman who first worked out that if you kept hospitals clean, then the rate of people who died in the hospital would go down enormously, something that
a lesson Mrs. Thatcher forgot.
Seems to have got lost in recent times, yeah. And not only that, but she was adamant that everyone was equal when it came to treatment, now including prostitutes, the people that were drunk and so on. She would go out of her way to bring those people into the hospital and make sure they were all looked after. And she was a hero. And there's a statue of her in the middle of Walsall, quite a big statue. And when I mentioned Sister Dora in the show, there's about 800 people at this show. I mean, there's no way of telling it if everybody knew, but it sounded to me like everybody in the room knew all about Sister Dora. And there's something
something
really
wonderful about that.
Yeah. And I think all sorts of little protests as well, that I've mentioned quite a few of them in the book, that I think some...
Well, we'll come back to them, because I've got to take a break for some capitalist messages. Once upon a time, he was a live wire, and always on my show. Now he's a rather sad Vince Cable. Business Secretary Vince Cable apologised after sensitive documents were found dumped in clear recycling bags outside his office. They included personal information about constituents and letters between MPs about government policy. Dr. Cable said sorry to constituents for the unacceptable breach of their privacy. But these people in Twickenham aren't impressed, and it's not easy to impress the good people of Twickenham.
It's not the first time this has happened with people in high places. Obviously, there are grave issues, I would imagine.
It's very worrying. We're all told to shred anything before we put it in the bin, etc. And there he is, just dumping sensitive documents.
Well, there you go. As Mark Steele was just pointing out to me, 18 months ago, Vince Cable was the most popular politician in Britain. Now, he isn't. Mark, I mean, you come from same left-wing milieu as me. As you were on that trail to these, lesser-trodden paths in the country, did you find any radical spirit in the land?
I would sort of, Yeah, well, I think the real question, which I suspect you know is, George, is there anywhere that hasn't got a history of protests? You know, there's just... the next one of the radio shows I'm doing is in Bungay, and I was just... Now, Bungay's a tiny little place in East Anglia, and it turns out that it was one of the most radical places. A lot of East Anglia was radical in the 1600s against the church, not against all of the church, but against the sort of much of what the Catholic Church was doing at the time, and then it became so radical that then when the landowners tried to enclose the land, a lot of the Puritans just went up the wall, and that tradition seems to have continued. And in the 1970s, there was an attempt by the landowners to buy the common off the people, if you like. And there's all
turn it into a Tesco's.
Well, that would have happened if they got away with it, I suppose. Eventually, wouldn't have been a Tesco's back then, I suppose, but something. And there were protests right through, and there's all these pictures of this quaint little, tiny little town that I've just sort of been walking through, and then I'm looking in this book at the same thing, full of people with placards protesting about the landowners taking our common off us and so on. And it's pretty much
they needed.
It's pretty much everywhere that's got that sort of
got the radical history. But did you find a spirit today that we're mad as hell and we're not going to put up with it anymore, or do you find large parts of the country largely quiescent?
Well, I suppose it's like. I suppose the answer to that is that there are as many people opposed to what's going on as there are in other countries. There's probably as many people here opposed to the cuts as there are in Greece. What we haven't got here is organisation, and so many of the people who are against libraries being shut down. I was, in Bungay talking to the librarians today. Their library's likely to be shut down. They're very much against it, obviously, against them being put out of work, while the top directors get a 49% increase in their salary over the last year. But they don't know what to do about it.
And is it not something in our character as well?
In Greece, you would know what to do about it.
Sure, but is that
there appears to be a big demonstration down the road with a load of people carrying lumps of rubble. Maybe we should join in with that. But
is it about character as well, that the British will tut about something while the Greeks will get out on the street and fight it?
Well, I suppose, a character is formed over a period of time, but it wasn't always our character, was it? It wasn't our character in the 70s, it wasn't our character in, 1640.
Well, I'm writing about the 70s now, and no, I mean, you're right. Look, let's take the legendary Carl in Plasto. Your missus will certainly know of Carl because he's been with me right from the very start of this show 6 years ago. Carl, welcome to the show.
Good evening, and nice to hear Mark.
Hiya, Carl, all right.
Fine. We talked before about the Nazi connections with Coca-Cola.
Right.
I remember, Jay. Do you recall that?
Well, we're reaching for our libel lawyers right at this minute. So be careful.
No, that's all right.
It's spelled with K's, is it?
They continue to...
The one thing here, Cole, I don't want to sort of rain on your parade, mate, but I think you've mixed me up with Mark Thomas. Because he wrote a book about...
Sorry.
He wrote a book about Coca-Cola. That's all right. It does happen all the time.
Oh, yeah. I get it.
And I do sometimes mix myself up with him.
Oh, dear me. I've made the right goose there.
No, it's all right. Don't worry.
Now, there's a spectre haunting Europe, I think. The spectre of communism. It's wonderful to see the hammers. And who would have predicted 20 years ago that the streets of Athens and Italy and France, all strong communist parties which have survived the end of the Soviet Union, and the reason it's a sort of Buddhist Marxist karma, I think, because the reason these three countries in particular have strong communist parties is because of the honourable record of the communists during the war. That's the roots, because they resisted the Nazis and they were the only ones who really stood up to the Nazis, Talking about Lord John Taylor, do you know the story? The House of Lords is going to
yes, he can.
Allow him
now that he's out of jail, he can take his seat again in the
12
Lords. Yes.
months spending the Rehabilitation of Offenders, Act is going berserk here. This man is a convicted. He's back on the gravy train.
Well, I mean, the only difference between him and some of the others is that he was convicted. I mean, this is the eve of Guy Fawkes night, and some people think that Guy Fawkes was one of the few men to enter Parliament with good intentions. There have always been rogues and criminals in Parliament. They just very rarely get convicted. Carl, thanks for the call, my friend. Mark, I mean, are you surprised at because we haven't spoken, I think, since the election. I mean, are you surprised at how people in Britain voted in the election? You surprised that the Liberals went into bed with the Tories?
I wasn't all that surprised, but because people didn't vote for this, for all the cuts that are happening. I mean, this is a well-rehearsed argument, but that's, they do not have a mandate to do this.
They don't.
They weren't, and and certainly the people that voted Liberal Democrat, I think it's fairly reasonable to say that most of the people that voted for them did not vote for them in order that they did not believe they were voting for people who were going to basically back up the Conservative Party.
And triple tuition fees.
No,
having
certainly,
to abolish
no. I think it's reasonable to say that if you go into an election saying, look at me, just in case you don't believe me, I'm going to sign all this, the mighty pledge, like some sort of monk from the 13th century, a mighty pledge, may the devil besiege me and torture all my family if for one moment I fail in my duty to oppose the tuition fees with every fibre of my being, that therefore people might be voting for you thinking you're going to oppose tuition fees rather than go, I don't know about actually.
Let's triple them instead.
Triple, abolish. I always get them two mixed up. So I don't think I think it's fair to say that people didn't vote for all the cuts that are happening.
Not that that's stopping them, of course. Let's take another couple of calls, Mark. It's kind of you to stay on because I did think that you were going at 12:30. I'll let you away in just 5-10 minutes. Yeah?
I like to let people think that I've got something really important to do at 1:45 in the morning.
Let's talk quickly to Sarah in Dudley. Sarah, welcome.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, go ahead.
Hi, Sarah.
Well, what it is really, it's about the social services, and have you heard of forced adoption by them?
Forced adoption? No, what do you mean?
Well, what it is, it's social services who actually force the foster carers to adopt our children.
How can they force? What do you mean?
Because, well, I've been through this situation myself, you see. I had my son taken away from me in 2000, all because somebody rang the police and said I was missing. Yet the police came to my house and I was there and everything was fine. But half hour later, the social workers came to my house, my old social worker that I grew up with in care, and walked in and said he was taking my son, even though the police said that there was no need to take him. Now, my son was adopted in December 2009, and the adopter actually stood up in court and stated that they don't want to adopt my son. It's actually social services that's making them adopt the child.
Goodness me, what a miserable state of affairs. The only thing I can say, Sarah, is obviously I can't give you advice specific to your case, but you really must go and see your Member of Parliament about this. Although it sounds like it's done and dusted, it's difficult to imagine that it was all done as kind of automatically as that. But if you think that there's any options open to you, then you really must go and see your Member of Parliament. You'll get their surgery details in the local library. Sarah, thanks for the call. David in Yelverton in Devon was given away at 12 days old, so we'll need to talk to him, but after this. Microsoft chairman Bill Gates says Steve Jobs, the late co-founder of software rival Apple, was a genius. It's 1 month today since Jobs died of cancer. Mr. Gates is at the G20 summit to push for a Robin Hood tax on financial institutions to help poorer countries. He says the two of them had a great mutual respect.
We competed with each other, said a lot of things about each other over the years, but basically he was a genius. He contributed a lot. He said a lot of tough things about me and a lot of nice things as well. And in his last 2 years, we got a number of times where we got to chat and share our respect for each other.
Now, can I just direct you to something, now that I've got your attention? Viva Palestina has just announced a terrific new project called Kick Off for Palestine. This is part of the kickback, actually, against the American decision to withdraw all their funding from UNESCO, the United Nations agency, which had the temerity in the week by an overwhelming majority to recognize the state of Palestine. So we think that we should get our retaliation in now. And so Viva Palestina is going to build a football pitch and, well, we'll call it a stadium, but it'll be more like wooden bleachers, so that the people in Gaza have got somewhere to play football. And we're gathering all those interested in the game, indeed in sport in general, to make that happen. So go to vivapalestina.org, or you can see it on my Facebook page. Now, Mark Steele is with me. He's the author of a terrific new book, In Town, One Man's Tour of Modern Britain. And my eye has been caught by the fact that he visited Edinburgh. Now, I have deeply ambivalent feelings about Edinburgh. As a child, this represented a great expedition for me to go from Dundee to Edinburgh, 60 miles away. And it was like a different world, Mark, at least in Princes Street. Which looked like Athens, indeed, was known as the Athens of the North. Yeah. But of course, Edinburgh is a tale of two cities, as we later learned from Irvine Welsh's wonderful body of work. How did you find Edinburgh? Which side did you see, the fur coat or the no knickers?
Well, if you go up to do the festival, which is how I first came across it in my 20s, then you just see the central bit, and you wander around there and think this is just marvellous and beautiful, and everything's festival and glorious, and there's a man playing the bagpipes outside the Waverley Station, and there's a sort of Thunderbird-looking monument and a putting green in the middle of a capital city on the high street. But of course, there's all the grime is pushed to the outside, really, isn't it? And on the estates and so on. And that's why. Well, it was unfairly, I think I make the point in there, it's unfairly got this image, like Glasgow people go, oh yeah, Edinburgh stuck up, they
don't regard it as a Scottish city.
No, exactly, it's stuck up. And I've had those arguments. I used to do a thing about saying which is a true story, I said to someone from Glasgow, I was going to Edinburgh, all that, going there the next day, you don't go there, stuck up, you middle class donkey. And I said, well, not the dustman. Do you think the dustman is hey, we stuck up, we dustman here. The Edinburgh dustman go, I can't possibly put that in the back of the truck. Those eggshells aren't free range, you understand.
They think it was sex is something you put coal in.
Yeah, but I think I'll do a thing in there about sort of everyone thinks there's this twee little sort of image that the slogan of Edinburgh is, oh, you'll have had your tea. This little thing that the Morningside ladies go. But then there's all these sort of areas.
In other words, you won't need me to give you tea.
Exactly. Yeah. But then it's got the worst drugs problem in Europe. I did one, and I said, I think I'll say that.
Well, I mean, Train Spotters.
Exactly.
Was in Edinburgh.
Exactly. And I don't, I say now, I don't suppose all the drug dealers are at the bottom of stairwells going, you'll have had your crack.
Very funny.
So it's very much, it's very much a divided.
It is, well,
a divided city, but that doesn't
like lots of places.
Yeah. Also, there's been. I mean, you'll be aware of this magnificent issue of the trams in recent years. I mean, a fiasco that I can't.
Some people want the country to be independent. I mean, it turns out that in the capital city they couldn't build a tram line.
No, it was utter fiasco, wasn't it? And it was quite hilariously so, to the point that actually I've got a friend in Edinburgh. When I was sort of writing the bit about in Edinburgh about the book, and I thought, I think I wrote the words, just universally derided as a fiasco or something like that. And then I thought, is that right? So I rang up my friend in Edinburgh and I said, if I was to mention the tram system, and she sort of went into this magnificent. I couldn't get off the phone for 10 minutes.
It's a very live wire. Definitely. Let me take this call, if I may, from David in Yelverton in Devon not least because I don't think I've ever spoken to anyone in Yelverton before. David, welcome to the show, my friend.
Good evening, George.
Good
How
evening
are you?
to you. I'm well and enjoying the show tonight. I hope you are. Now, you wanted to comment on the adoption issue, yeah?
That's correct, and it's nice to have a supporter from Tottenham's Feeder Club with you.
Tottenham's Feeder Club.
yeah.
Who do you support, Mark?
Palace.
Oh, okay.
There you go. I heard him the other day when he was on Hawksby and Jacobs.
Oh, he was on Hawksby and Jacobs, was he? Well, he didn't tell me that. He's been moonlighting. Here was I thinking this was exclusive.
George,
oh dear.
there's
Sorry
something
about
I've got to tell you. I've been seeing another programme.
Oopsie.
Go ahead, David. Go ahead, mate.
No, my point of view is from actually the child's point of view. As you said, I was given away at 12 days. I'm 42 and a half. So I was given away in 1969. Excuse me. The point, and subconsciously, there's a hell of a lot of things that go on when you're taken away from your mother, because obviously you've been with them, you've grown in them for 9 months, and that's the person you know. I personally, I've been seeing a counsellor for almost 12 months now, and I didn't realise all the sort of stuff you do subconsciously. There's a book out there, it's called Primal Wound. Admittedly, it's from an American perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But reading it, it upset me, and I could see a lot of myself in there.
And were you adopted?
Not legally. Technically, I was sort of fostered. Because it was 1969, my mother gave me away to somebody she knew, who...
Oh, I see.
After 12 days. Excuse me.
And when did you learn this?
I was told, as my circumstances, as soon as I was obviously able to know. I've known for... I'm 42 and a half, as I said, so I've probably known since 6 or 7 that my mother, who brought me up, was not my birth mother.
Mm-hmm. So do you remember a time when you didn't know you were adopted? Was it a sort of, were you suddenly told at some point? Or do you remember, when you say 6 or 7, do you just mean...
Yeah, I mean, have you any memory of what went before?
How do you mean? Sorry.
Well, I mean, did you think when you were told by your foster parents...
Parent. I was brought up by one person.
Parent, yeah. I mean, did you think that she was your mother?
That's difficult to answer now.
Yeah, because, I mean, that in order to sort of calibrate the trauma, at least on the surface, the obvious trauma...
As far as I was concerned, sorry, George, to interrupt, but as far as I was concerned, my mum, who brought me up, was my mum.
Right.
Yeah. And I was told, probably as soon as I could understand, that she wasn't my birth mother. Yeah. And I had I had a social worker until the age of about 16, and so that for me is normal. But then in the last 12 months, things that have happened to me, I was really, really on the verge of sod this sort of life. I had enough. But thankfully for myself and for my children, I got help, and then reading this book, which my counsellor gave me, it's sort of like, I'm reading it, sometimes when I was reading it, I was like, oh my God, that's me. That's me.
So, I mean, obviously, you were 12 days old, so you never knew your birth mother in that sense. But you obviously think you see the bad things that have happened to you or problems in your life are nonetheless related to the fact that you were effectively given away. Is that right?
George, reading the book, everybody who is born, you know your mother has carried you for 9 months. You know that person.
I'm not sure about that.
No,
I have to say myself, I was adopted. Sounds like fairly similar circumstances. 10 days I was, apparently. And that's not my experience. I'm not saying that that's, that yours isn't valid or, that what you say isn't right, but I don't think it's the same for everyone. I've not had that at all. I've not had that.
No, and it's certainly, I've not had that experience, so, I'm flying blind in one sense on that, but it just strikes me that the fact that you're carried by someone for 9 months before you're born does not necessarily imprint itself on you for the rest of your life, and that a happy adoption can be just that. It can be a happy adoption. Was that your experience, or do you not want to talk about that?
Was it mine?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't, no, I don't have a sort of big thing about it at all. I did try to, this is a long story that I think might come out one day, but I did sort of try and find my natural mother, and in fact it took years, and eventually I did track her down, and then she didn't want to know.
Really?
And then I thought,
did that upset you?
No, not really. I thought I was a little bit. I was a bit annoyed about it, because I thought it was just rude. Hang on, I've got all this trouble to find you, and then you don't even have the decency to, I think I remember saying, blimey, if someone came round my house and they'd come from a long way away, even if I wasn't related to them, I'd give them a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Well,
let's hope it never happens from any of these places in your book.
But then that doesn't mean it's not valid. But I don't know. I do sort of wonder whether it might be because of some other reason that the person that adopted you did something. I don't think it's inevitable at all.
No, I don't think so. I'll tell you what. Capitalism has reared its ugly head again. Now, for men d'un certain âge, well, for me, this news is not surprising. This week, Debbie Harry picked up the Ultimate Icon Prize at the Cosmopolitan Women of the Year Awards. She says she's been lucky to enjoy more than 40 years in the music business and is delighted to still be doing a job she loves.
I've always known that I'm lucky to be able to do music and to perform and to make a fool of myself, but have a good time with it and make other people have a good time.
Well, I was just telling Mark a family secret there, but the red light came on and I had to hurriedly.
Yeah, we've got to pretend we're listening to Debbie Harry.
Debbie, we're all delighted that you're still in the business and sounding and looking fabulous, I must say. I've got Mark Steele with me. He is one of the... I looked again at the books just to make sure that I'd actually read all the books that he's done, and I have, in fact, and got them all. It's Not a Runner Bean, Reasons to be Cheerful, Vive la Revolution, and What's Going On. And he'd have written more if he wasn't supporting Crystal Palace, as he pointed out. Tottenham Hotspur's feeding club, as a caller then pointed out. You chose the underdog in political terms, and you've chosen the underdog in football terms.
Yeah, it's just right for me, the Palace. It's sort of...
Is it just proximity, or is it more than that?
Yeah, that's the reason, but it just sort of... but it's just right for me as well. I don't think I'd have terrible trouble supporting a team like Chelsea or something. Well, I just wouldn't be able to do it, even if I was brought up in Chelsea. If I was born on the centre circle, I couldn't. I just
because they're too big, too rich.
Well, yeah, it just makes a mockery of it. When I feel it seems to me like almost being like the kid that hangs around with the bully. People that think there's somehow. I support Chelsea and they beat all the other teams. I've just decided to it's almost like you might as well say, I've decided to support a huge number. And who do you support? 51. I support 200. Wow. That's
fair
daft.
Point. I can see, I spent 3 absolutely wonderful hours this week with Joey Barton, the very controversial player.
Oh, how did you get on?
Fantastically. He's a terrific guy. And, he had demons. He's on top of them. He's working hard to to do that, and his move to Queen's Park Rangers has been a terrific success.
Right, Warnock's got him under control.
Warnock and him have a good relationship. His relationship with the crowd is good. In fact, his relationship with the crowd has been good everywhere he's went. It's been other players.
It's interesting because there's sort of sports people who are like that. They're obviously they're quite often really bright, aren't they? As well, which I imagine he is.
Well, Joey Barton he has to be the most politicised footballer in the country. If there's a more politicised one, I haven't yet met him. I mean, he wanted to meet me because he's interested in my politics and in the work that I do on here and elsewhere, and he was fantastically well informed. But I raise it not to name drop, but to make the point that although I never thought I'd go along and cheer for a team called Rangers, it is actually now my local team.
Right.
And I'm going to go along to it. Now, it's a small crowd, it's a small club, and he was explaining to me that has a very special attraction. Is that the relationship you've got with Palace?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think there's a great camaraderie between football supporters of teams that aren't the very top teams. It's almost like, you meet someone who supports Bury or Lincoln or something, and you think, all right, yeah, we can talk about a shared set of emotions here, really, especially when you get to a certain age and there's a bit of you that realises this is a bit ridiculous, But and that doesn't happen. If I meet someone and they say, "Oh yeah, no, I'm a Chelsea fan," I think, "Oh, how can you do? I just couldn't do that." You'd be club that's run by this
you'd
absolutely
be watching
grotesque figure.
Exactly. You'd be watching the current court proceedings with a certain
you would indeed.
Bone sticking in your throat.
You would indeed. And I think the same with Manchester City. When I sort of Manchester City fans saying, "Oh, this is fantastic because we've got this player, that player, we're playing really well." I think, well, no, you're not. What's happened is that you've been bought by a ridiculously uber wealthy bunch of
£1 billion
Yeah.
that guy has spent
Yes.
in Manchester City. I mean, at a time when there are people in Yemen next door to his country, or not far away from it, who are actually starving to death, and indeed being bombed as well as starving to death.
Exactly. There's a wonderful journalist called David Conn. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He writes about football. He wrote a lovely book called The Beautiful Game. And I heard him on the radio a little while ago, and a Manchester City fan rang in, and he was talking about the corruption at the top of the game, in particular with characters like these people who've bought Manchester City and the obscenity of it, as you've just described. And this Manchester City fan just kept saying, "Yeah, but I don't care about that. I just want trophies." And they would conversate, "Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't believe that you don't care if people are living in dire poverty. Look, I'm telling you, I just want trophies in that cabinet."
All that glisters is not gold. Let's quickly take these last two calls. Dermot is in Merseyside. Dermot, sorry to keep you waiting. Go ahead.
You're okay, George?
Very well,
much.
sir, yeah.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to make a couple of points, George, about, you had Matt O'Connor on earlier.
Yes.
And about the Family Justice Review.
Yes.
Basically, I mean, if you look at the statistics in this country, 1 in 4 children are children of divorce or separation. And I think it's something like 30 to 40% of dads don't have any contact with the children 2 years after separation.
Although that includes a lot of runaway dads, doesn't it?
Possibly, George, but, I think there's more to it than that. I think most parents, irrespective if they fall out of love with the other parent, want to continue and love and parent their children post-separation. And, it's a difficult one. Things aren't black or white, George.
No, that's right, Dermot. And given the lateness of the hour, I can't allow you to develop that any further, I'm afraid, Dermot. Please forgive me for that. Now, Thinking Man and Woman's Overnight Radio just walked into the studio.
Good evening, George.
It's the legendary Matt Ford. Matt, how's it going, sir?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Now, I've got a fellow comedian.
Indeed.
This man does the Edinburgh Festival.
Yeah. It's very
stand-up.
So you're on from 1 till 6.
That's right. Yeah.
I bet you
Now
get
that's funny.
The people that ring in at 4 in the morning, how mad, are they?
Well, no, not mad. They're the sanest you will ever find.
ban drunk callers, but Matt can't afford to ban drunk callers, or there'd be no show. Go ahead.
Can't even afford to ban drunk staff, let alone drunk callers. But we'll be talking about bonfire night as this time tomorrow. Well, all weekend people will be setting off fireworks and everything. Now, I've never had a problem with fireworks. You tend to think that people who campaign for their banning are just being killjoys. And I've never been too bothered if people's dogs and cats are a little bit petrified for one night of the year. Last year, though, I got fireworks thrown at me outside a pub, and it did slightly make me realise that they are quite hazardous and can be used as weapons. So I'm slightly more open-minded now to the argument that maybe they should...
Open-minded on Talksport? What kind of liberal are you?
But perhaps that they should only be used at licensed events. Now, I'm not saying that I've definitely reached that conclusion, but I'm certainly more amenable to
Well,
that.
at the risk of sounding like I'm just desperately trying to plug my book, which is not what I'm trying to do, but I've got a chapter in my book about Lewes in Sussex, which is the most astonishing place.
With the big effigies that they
They
do.
have big effigies, but it's the whole... There is something absolutely magnificent about Lewes on firework night, because... It's not at all from above. There's no great sponsored fireworky displays with a DJ from Capital Radio going, it's just 35 seconds until the most fantastic Capital chrysanthemum fountain explodes, and we're all going, and then they get someone from JLS or something to do some daft dance. It's nothing like that. Everyone in the town more or less is in a bonfire society, and they organise this extraordinary display. And we got there about 5 last year to it, thinking, maybe go for a meal, have a coffee first. But there's no chance of that. It's already packed with people walking with these bonfires, carrying barrows with bonfire. And then you think, and all dressed in tatty but wonderful costumes. And then you think, God, this is amazing. And it's just, you can barely breathe for the smoke. And then after about 20 seconds, boom, right in your ear. And you think, what the... And people are just throwing fireworks at each other.
Oh, Matt Ford wouldn't like that. But you're going to have to stay up all night to get across. Thanks to Mark Steele. Buy his book, In Town, published by Fourth Estate. Stay up for Matt Ford. Grease is the word.